It's okay. All right, you're going to want to turn the clock off for a second. Okay. So when he says Q talent, you just have to point to me. You don't have to do any counting down. Just go like this.
Okay, I thought I was counting. Sorry.
It's okay. No, I'm just telling you because there's too many voices in your head right now. Just go like that.
Okay.
When he says Q talent, just go like that.
Okay.
All right. We're ready, Michael. Good evening and welcome to the final Inside Government Show for the fall 2022 semester here at KU Community College and broadcast on Spectrum, Verizon Fios, the Auburn Regional Media Access, better known as ARMA, as well as Win 89.1, the college's radio station. I'm your host, Guy Cosentino. We are delighted to have in the studio today Auburn City Manager Jeff Dygert to give us a city update. We had planned to originally have him before the city budget was adopted in June, but had to cancel the show back then because I contracted COVID, even though I had been given the shots and boosted. We've asked the manager to come on for the final show of this semester, as well as our next guest after this, to talk not only about the city budget, but also road work that is now underway, what the impact of the decision of Michael Quill not to seek a fifth term might be on the coming year at City Hall, and a whole host of other items. Welcome back.
Thank you. Good to be back.
Nice to.
It's been a while. I couldn't remember when the last time.
I think it was last fall because you were the last guest.
Okay.
And then things changed. So I think you and Stephanie Hutchinson for the Auburn Housing Authority were supposed to be our last guest. And you're our last guest of this semester.
Right.
So we'll do it. So you did pass a budget back
Yes.
in June. I don't want to get deep into the numbers,
Right.
but I'm assuming the budget passed.
Budget passed. Had very little community feedback on that, right? So we always do an open process where people have a chance to come to city council meetings. We didn't have an awful lot of feedback.
Is that because you didn't raise taxes that much or cut programs?
Well, we didn't cut programs. We've kind of stayed the course with programs, and that's a good thing. We had a modest increase in the tax that we had to collect, but through a variety of things, I think things were relatively stable for most folks.
And did you have to raise any other fees besides?
We ended up raising the trash fee, which is sometimes controversial. But as you know,
for some new operations.
well, it really is to take care of all things trash, right? So the trash program is not something we're required to do by any sort of law or mandate, but it's a service that the city's provided for years, and we try to do that in the most fair and equitable way possible, and that is through a user fee that is, spreads that
Over
responsibility
10,000 properties.
right, and based on how much of that service they utilize as well.
So other than that, we'll get to sewer and water, but I don't think there was a modest increase in one of those, wasn't there?
A little bit on the water side of things, and we continue to monitor those things. We continue to heavily invest in our water and sewer systems because we need to, and because it's the right thing to do. And I think with some of the things that we're seeing potentially happening in Central New York, it's a good thing we've been investing in our infrastructure.
You're talking about Micron.
I am.
So how, I know you've been in some meetings recently. What do you see? I know talking to one of your city councilors, they say it's 55 minutes by the clock if you put it in Google Maps from City Hall.
I think you can make it a little quicker.
Well, you and I would be, but I'm not sure this person will be. But anyway, it's about 55 minutes. Right. So what do you as a city see as the impact for you?
Well, I think that certainly the prospect of spin-off businesses and things like that, I think that is real. What we've seen happen in other communities with similar type projects is there are spin-off businesses. So that say 40, 50-minute drive time might be reduced for people that are employed with a
So
spin-off
these secondary
business between here
businesses where you think the gold mine will be maybe for Central New York.
there. Right. You know, whether it's supply chain or any of those associated businesses or spin-off businesses, I think it's important for us to look also at construction. So right now we have, I suspect we're going to have this I-81 project going through, going to need a ton of construction workers from all different trades. They're going to have to improve infrastructure for the Micron project. They'll have to have construction trades for that, as well as for the construction of the building.
A number of trades here as well as companies here.
I think that in a lot of ways our roots are with trades type jobs, blue collar type trades jobs. So, and there's nothing wrong with that. I don't have a problem with the high tech jobs they're talking about, but I think what we know and what we have experience with is where we start some of those things.
So do you see it having an impact on housing?
Yes.
How so?
I think that at some point in time, right, people aren't necessarily going to want, everybody's different. Some people are going to want to live as close as they can. Some people are going to want maybe a little different feel than they get from the city of Syracuse. So we can offer different things for different folks, right?
And we also don't know what the world of telecommuting will be.
Right. But for folks that want some sort of an urban city lifestyle without some of the other things that may go along with a bigger population center like Syracuse, we're a good option. We're the second biggest municipality in that region. So there may be some things that are attractive to people.
So are you and your planning
service
department looking at this right now?
Yes.
I'm going to get back to the budget and then go to a couple of other things before we get back to sewers. Any new programs in your budget this year?
You got me thinking back onto things. You know, we are trying to focus on quality of life things and neighborhoods and things like that. So we did provide the Public Works Department with a couple of extra bodies, and that's been impactful. That helps us maintain parks and playgrounds to a little bit higher level than we were previously able to do, and I think that's important. And that was prior to anything related to this Micron discussion. And I think we really need to start looking at, not that we haven't, but if we want to really attract folks, we need to work on curb appeal to the extent that we can.
I go by Hoops Park every day, and just that park alone, your young man there, and what limited staff he's done, just wonderful. That park looks great.
Right. We still have work to do in our city parks and playgrounds, but we've done a massive investment in parks and playgrounds in the last handful of years.
Do you want to lay the groundwork that you might have some people who are not going to be happy with what's going to go on at the pond at Hoops Park?
Well, that's something that's going to be definitely a public relations feat for us to get through that. And yes,
so explain what's going on.
So we have some grant funding for a project. Those folks that go to Hoops Park on a regular basis may notice that over time the wall that is the perimeter for the pond is in disrepair. We want to go in and rebuild that wall, clean out the pond, do some other improvements. So for a period of time, Hoops Park is going to be under construction.
So it's going to be dry.
It'll be dry. It'll be torn up to some extent.
So when will that commence?
I couldn't tell you that off the top of my head.
Do you think, is it a 2023 job?
I don't think it will be. Okay. And we're going to have to get ahead of that, right? Because there's so many folks that, they plan events there, whether it's a...
So I was going to say, will you still do your movies and music in the park?
We'll have to consider that, and we could potentially move some of that stuff back. But for folks that like to do things for their, different events, weddings, for different not-for-profits and weddings and such, we're going to need to get the word out.
Because you rent out the park a lot for weddings.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, it's not a huge revenue generator.
No,
but there are times when there will be multiple weddings there, even in a single day. And they just schedule them out. So it's going to be an impact, but it's necessary, and it'll be much better when it's done.
Back to the budget. Was the budget adopted unanimously? Do you have any dissent?
Actually, I'd have to go back. I think we may have had 1 December.
You had 1
vote.
December.
Yeah.
So one of the big factors in your budget is sales tax. You're through the first quarter now. Your
Yep.
budget starts July 1st. So at the end of September, you were through your first quarter. How are sales tax revenues at this
We're
stage?
still seeing. We've been seeing growth. It slowed down. We had some really significant growth. It's still sales tax is still strong right at the moment.
So are you on target for your budget?
Yes. Yes. So we try not to project over a realistic number for growth in sales tax, but it's been strong.
So is it higher than last year's revenues? Is that your target?
Yes.
And you at this
Yes.
stage,
But the consistent growth hasn't been. We had a couple really strong years year over year. We're not showing that now, but it's consistent.
So obviously you were out of town last week teaching.
Mhm.
What do you teach and where?
I still have my fingers stuck in some fire service stuff and all over New York State, and we teach a lot of different things.
So what do you teach?
Mostly the focus is on leadership.
Yes.
Yeah.
So you were out of town when there was an announcement made in Chambers
Yes.
on Thursday. So the 2023 elections have started in the last week. We're most likely in day 5 right now,
Right.
with Mayor Quill's announcement that he will not seek re-election to a 5th term. Will that have any impact on the business that you conduct with you and your staff?
Oh, absolutely. I think absolutely. Because everybody's part of a team, and the players in that team affect the dynamic. So yes, it'll have an impact. Just like everything else, whenever there's an election and council changes, it changes the dynamic, which changes sometimes focus of city resources or attention, and I'm sure that'll happen again.
So you have one of those rare distinctions. You worked for Mayor Quill in 2 different capacities when he was in 2 different capacities. One
Right.
is when he was fire chief and you were at the fire department, and then now as city manager while he's mayor.
Mhm.
Any thoughts on working for and with him?
We've got just recently passed by 28 years of working together in a variety of different capacities. I've worked with him when he was in different ranks at the fire department, but certainly significantly the most amount was as the fire chief. We've always, I think, had a level of respect for one another, and there have been tough discussions had. There have been some spirited discussions had. Those have
In
continued.
both capacities,
Those have
or?
continued throughout the years, and he cares about Mayor Quill cares about the city of Auburn, and he cares about tradition and history, and certainly a lot of the things that he holds very dear to himself, and but it's I've had good opportunities for it. You caught me a little off guard. I should have expected the question, but
Well, all right. So let me give you something a little different.
But he's I think provided me fair opportunities through my career, and again we've had.
So he's a real cheerleader for you.
There's times if
In
you
front of
had
us.
spent more time with us, you'd know that it wasn't all cheerleading, and I think that's what I respect most is the fact that we've had different discussions through the years, good, bad, tough discussions. We've taken on tough topics in both capacities, and we've made progress. I think that's the most important takeaway is that we get through all that stuff and we accomplish something.
So let me talk about legacy, and this is not to be morbid because he's still got 14 more months in office, and so people shouldn't count him out for the next. He's not a lame duck by any nature, but what do you think? 15 years now.
Mhm.
What's the legacy right now?
Well, I'd have to go through. I mean, it's a lengthy list of accomplishments, right? During his tenure, whether you talk about the tenure as a leader in the fire department or a leader of the city. A lengthy list of accomplishments, but certainly a devotion to community, right, and to make things better, to listen, to different perspectives, to take on tough topics and try to drill through to some sort of resolve, some sort of, um, whether it be compromise. Sometimes there isn't, but most of the time there's compromise and there is progress.
So you and I were somewhere else a couple of weeks ago, and I joked, I think you are now the second longest serving city manager
Yeah,
after Bruce Clifford.
Who would have thought, right?
So Bruce Clifford did, I think, 25 years straight, 25, 26. You are in what year?
I think this is 6 or maybe getting into 7.
So when does your current contract end?
2025.
Has the mayor's decision changed anything about your plans?
No, I think it's too early to.
So you don't know if you'll go you're planning to serve well past when he leaves City Hall, and then you'll come to that.
There's a lot of work to be done between now and 2025.
All right. Well, let's talk about
see how that all goes.
Let's talk about one of my favorite programs right now. Is what are you doing on John Street and East Genesee Street?
Okay. So one of the issues that we have throughout the city, being an old northeastern city, is way back when, for a history lesson, sewers were combined. So storm sewer and sanitary sewer are combined. That creates problems with us capacity-wise. So when we have a big storm event like we recently had with the hurricane or the remnants of the hurricane going through, occasionally we get a sewer overflow event, which is a problem for the DEC. It's not good. We know that. Lots of other cities are dealing with it. So little by little, we go through the city and we do sewer separation projects so that the storm water doesn't overtax our sanitary sewer system. So part of that was continued in that area separation of the two different sewers, some improvement for the water services and the businesses in that area, replacement of sidewalks, and fixing the streets.
So on that, it's still a little ragged there. I thought the original plan was to have it done by November 1st. Are you on track time-wise?
We're pretty close. We actually may have been at one point where we're slightly ahead, and then supply chain issues. I hate saying that because it always sounds like a cheap excuse, but it's a real thing. And so we had a few issues. I came through there on the way here, and they're laying down the final coat of asphalt right now.
And is it on budget?
Yes.
On how is it being paid for?
There are some different funds being utilized there. You may recall that about 2 years ago, New York State implemented touring funds, is what they were referred to, or touring roads program, similar to the legacy programs like CHIPS. So we had a little over $1 million that were allotted to us through that program. A lot of that project's being funded through that program, and potentially a little bit of ARPA funding in that neighborhood.
And so your expectation is that project will be finished this week or next week by the outside?
The roadway project, we still have sidewalk restorations to do and things like that.
Can you do it if we get much snow?
So the basics of John Street, which is pretty straightforward, we expect that to be done this season. Some partial or at least a rough-in restoration of Genesee Street. But we are discussing something that may bring the East Hill section of sidewalks, to a little bit higher level of finish. That would happen next construction season.
So your friend Mayor Quill said I had to wait till you got into the studio to ask you this question.
I know where you're going.
My favorite topic. I'm told
we're going to put it to bed finally.
We're gonna, after 30 plus years, I'm loving to hear this. You're putting in some new timing mechanisms with our traffic system. What are you doing?
So there's a number of traffic signals throughout the city. Some are controlled and owned by New York State, and some are about 50-50, and we own the other half roughly. But we're working with New York State, and we're doing our own program right at the moment to put in controllers on several intersections. I believe it's about a dozen intersections that will take into account through sensors rather than built into the road, but visual sensors, what the traffic is doing at any particular intersection and allow a green light to stay green longer, or to hold up traffic and clear it out in another direction. So not necessarily timed, but computer controlled so that we optimize flow through intersections.
So the goal here would be just to ease stops and starts along the
Right.
route.
Yep.
And how long is this project going to take?
It's again getting the material or the equipment to do it's going to take a little bit of time, but we've already ordered the equipment. We have one in service now, so if anybody's curious, when they get to the intersection of Genesee Street and the loop road by Wegmans, if you look up at the traffic signal, there's a little thing that looks kind of like a candy cane with a camera on the end of it, and that is what monitors the traffic, and then it goes to a computer that decides how it's going to let traffic proceed there. So it should result in less, waiting at a red light when there's nobody else around.
And will that hopefully work for the whole section down Genesee Street?
Each one will be independent. So
Okay.
based on a number of things, it could be that, maybe there's whether there's construction or an accident or just a backup somewhere else that takes away that normal flow. It should adjust each intersection based on what's happening at that intersection.
Any idea how much this is going to cost?
It's not horrible. Off the top of my head, I'm thinking that's about $150,000. Right
And
at the
any of
moment.
that being paid for by the state?
Yes, we're utilizing the touring funds to do that.
And will the state do the same on their?
We're trying to convince them that that's a good idea. So
Because they are
Yeah.
mainly responsible for the arterial.
correct.
To the extent that they have not raised I don't think they've raised in decades the amount of money they give you for maintenance.
Arterial maintenance, right?
Arterial
Going
maintenance.
back to almost like I think 1987.
Right. So when the Cuomo administration changed, the first Cuomo administration changed that process, and every mayor since has complained at an ICOM meeting
Yes,
that they haven't raised that. They are responsible for the arterial, though.
correct. We are responsible for certain aspects of it, like general maintenance. That's why we mow the arterial and we do certain things to it. Once projects get beyond a certain scope, the state takes over. So with that in mind, we have been in conversations with New York State Department of Transportation for an upcoming project to resurface the arterial. That's probably going to be a couple of years out, and we have identified, our water and sewer crews have identified that we're having some issues with some of the old drainage work that exists below the road surface. So we're working through things with New York State to try to improve that prior to doing that road resurfacing.
And where are you with the parking garage? I know for a while it was closed to a certain extent,
Yep,
or it became very
it's
confusing.
fully accessible to folks at this point. There's still a little bit of work that needs to be done. We're going to be replacing the windows in the stair towers and upgrading those. And then we have some electrical work. We continue to incrementally do lighting upgrades. Those will continue. We'll probably be doing that with actually our city staff. And then we've got to have a conversation with city council related to our parking program.
Well, that's what I'm
If
going
you
to
can
ask
imagine,
you.
that's probably the only
One
thing
of the
that gets
reasons
talked
that
about more
you
than the
let
cameras.
what say that again?
Probably the only thing we talk about more than timing of streetlights is
Well, I'm going to
parking.
ask you about that because one of the issues has been that because you were doing that project, and was some of that money still left over from the visitor center?
So there were two different things that happened there. We had a repair project funded through insurance proceeds because of a fire that happened in the building and caused quite a bit of damage. And then there were some funds left over from the visitor center, as you just mentioned.
So connected with this has been that you have given the ability to have some limited, some free parking for 2 hours in the downtown loop area.
Right.
Do you still think that continues, or is that something that's now going to be assessed now that you've got the parking garage?
Right. That's something we have to look at. We have to look at the entirety of parking downtown, how the parking garage plays into that, and that'll be a policy decision that council makes.
Do you think that there will be a staff recommendation that says limit?
I think
What-
there will be a staff recommendation.
And I want to ask you this question because William Fulton, a well-known writer and planner, who's from Auburn, was here about 2 months ago, made a great presentation at Willard Chapel, and someone asked him about back-end parking. and he is a planner. Questioned the logic of that. I do know there was a period of time where the city, to get state funds, had to agree to back in parking. Where are you on that? Not as to a change, but where are you on the timeline? Are you at a point right now where you can reassess?
I'd have to look at that. Some of it's linked to funding and things like that. I don't know off the top of my head.
Do you think this will be something the city will be taking up, the city council will be taking up again?
I don't know. Honestly, it seems for the most part to have calmed down. People generally seem to have accepted it. I think the longer we go, the more people will see it in other areas. I've been told that the city of Cortland is looking at a project downtown that's going to result in the same thing. So I think it will become, I know it will become more common, and that may change some perception about how crazy it seems to be.
So you've got John and East Genesee Street done, or nearly done. Kellett's, the pocket park is in place now. What's up next for the city?
We've got a lot of projects. Again, most of them fall back to water and sewer projects, but not all of them, right? So I'll talk about water and sewer in a second, but we are currently just received responses back for an RFP that was put out a few weeks ago for a rehabilitation of the police department building as well as the ambulance building that's connected to it. We know we need to do something with City Hall. It's time that it gets an upgrade. 1930s era building, very similar to the police station. Technology has changed dramatically, and the building's approaching 100 years old. So we know that that's going to be a project that we need to take into account. And we're under a significant amount of pressure from the New York State court system to increase the capacity and the size of our city court space, which is actually housed in the county's building, the old post office. So those are some big things. We've got some bridge projects we're working on, and then our water and
so I want to ask you projects. For 3 or 4 minutes we have left, because we won't get to everything. So about 30 years ago, the city undertook a $60 million upgrade of the sewer and water system. Are you looking at undertaking a similar sized project again?
Yes, it will be. It's slightly different than what happened before. It's very technical in nature, but it will be a major building construction project to the tune of about $75 million.
So $75 million. So 30 years ago, that was largely funded in part by increasing fees, which had to be done, sewer and water. But there were some low interest and no interest loans from the state of New York and some grant money. Is that still available?
Yes, and so we rely heavily on grant funds to accomplish what we accomplish. We've got a great team of people that put the city of Auburn and the taxpayers in a fantastic position. We accomplish a lot thanks to a significant amount of grant funding, and there's a lot of work that goes into that. We know that currently we have grant funding for the project. It's not fully grant funded. But we have significant grant funding for the project. We also have been notified that we are eligible for some no interest loans for a portion of it, and we'll continue to pursue.
And I'm not saying it's your tenure, but there was some criticism 2 decades ago that all these upgrades were done 30 years ago, and then there was a time period where no maintenance was done. Are you playing catch up now on some of that?
I don't know so much. There's a lot of things that they just plain wear out. It's a really tough environment. It's a corrosive environment, things like that. And we need to change our response, our approach to solids and biosolids to meet DEC regulations and things like that, which continually evolve.
And do you see that you will have to raise rates for sewer and water? Obviously, a $75 million project is huge.
In the short term, right? So that's a large project that's going to span over several years. But in the short term, we think that the old debt falling off and the grant funding and things like that will be able to maintain relative stability in that fund. And there may be some adjustments to rates, but not things that should make people's heads spin.
And last question, when will it start?
Work is underway, right? So the planning process is underway. Within the last few weeks, we actually received back the 100%, what's referred to as 100% design documents. So we know now we can go through this massive document, and it's pretty much down to the last detail of this facility.
So going out to bid in the
So
spring.
it'll be going out. Actually, I think it's already gone out to bid.
So some construction can start in 2023.
I think the planning for it, there's a lot that's going to go into this. So there's still going to have to be some planning for transition and things like that. We'll see how it goes.
All right. Well, we're going to have you back in the spring, hopefully.
Okay.
We'll talk about baseball.
All right.
Because you just renewed the contract with the Doubledays. We'll talk about where you're using these, the new federal funds, the American Rescue Funds, and other things. But we'd love to have you back in the early spring, if you don't mind, to cover what we didn't cover today.
All right. And the list will probably grow, I'm sure.
I'm sure it will. Our guest has been the Auburn City Manager, Jeffrey Dygert. We want to thank him for always being willing to be here. Mr. Dygert has been always willing to come on, and we appreciate that. We hope you have a great holiday season.
Thank you. You as well. Appreciate the opportunity.
We'll be back in just a moment with our final Beyond the Front Page for the fall 2022 semester here at the college with Auburn Housing Authority Executive Director Stephanie Hutchinson. We'd like to let you know that if you want to send us some ideas for questions or thoughts for future guests as we return come February to Inside Government or Beyond the Front Page, you can do so at cozguytho@aol.com. Before we depart, I do want to thank the students and staff here at the college for their work in making our public affairs shows and the candidate forums that we do a reality, specifically Professor Steve Keeler, Mike Morano, and Jeff Sesniak, who put a great team together here with our students. We also hope that you will join us when we return in February, but in the between, we hope you have a great Thanksgiving next week and a holiday season through the new year. I'm Guy Cosentino for Community College. Thank you for joining us and watching us, and be safe.